Foursquare Missions. The International Church of the Foursquare Gospel was founded by a missionary and had a missionary thrust from the beginning. Today's mission arm is known as FMI, Foursquare Missions International. Originally, and until recently, missions was defined by Foursquare as church planting outside the United States. This has been consciously changed to include all evangelistic and church planting activities involving people of different culture and language groups, whether they are inside or outside the United States. However, this change is still very new and has not totally permeated the United States Foursquare churches. Still, within Foursquare, some paramissionary groups are adding the missionary identity to their current identities. For example, Foursquare Chaplaincy license and assigns chaplains to military forces, hospices, and disaster response, among other areas. They view these assignments as evangelical missions because the target populations are usually unchurched and often different culturally and linguistically. The qualifications for becoming an FMI missionary require the applicant to hold an international license through Foursquare and complete a missionary training course. There is an online course component as well as a 4-week class component. There is no educational requirement. However, graduation from Life Bible College qualifies the graduate to receive an international license. Others can qualify for a district license and then apply for an international license 2 years later. There are other ways to become a missionary in the Foursquare Church, but the recognition is through a local church rather than by Foursquare International. Due to the book Disciples for All Nations by John Amstutz, Foursquare has a clear definition of its goals for missionaries and goals for their work. It is the desire of Foursquare for each one of a country's Foursquare churches to become part of an autonomous and independent group within their country. The path of this independence is presented as 4 stages of individual church activity based on the church's growing maturity. The path of a country's independence is based on the same 4 stages of growth, but for the country's Foursquare churches as a whole. This has a different look in each country. For example, the Philippines is a stage 4 country. FMI no longer posts a missionary in that country. Churches in the Philippines regularly send missionaries to other countries on both short and long-term missions and plant churches within their own country. Panama is another example of a stage 4 country which plants churches in its own country, has missionaries sent to unreached people groups in the jungle interior, and has several missionary teams posted in several countries, including the United States. Although the U.S. is a stage 4 country, we have large groups of Spanish-speaking people that we barely reach. Panama has 2 missionary teams in 2 parts of the U.S. working within Spanish-speaking communities. Foursquare has also taken, and is continuing to take, a look at the way they do missions. There is a recognition of hard truths as expressed in the book Toxic Christianity, and a determined effort not to make or repeat the mistakes explained in that book. Certain procedures have been put in place. With short-term missions, Foursquare has taken the stand that all short-term teams should coordinate their trips through the FMI missionary in the target country, if there is one, or through that country's national leader. It is emphasized that the missions team is to find out what is needed and wanted in the country and plan their trip around that, rather than having an idea and forcing it on the target country. This is a paradigm shift for most short-term mission teams. There are many reasons that this change needs to be made, including better stewardship of resources, removal of patronization and a sense of superiority, and recognition of the purpose of missions, and the goal that the result of the trip will be positive for the receiving country and not a detriment. With long-term missionaries, the focus has shifted from the stereotypical picture of a struggling young couple in the jungle with no or few resources, primitive living conditions, and daily life-threatening dangers. This picture is romantic at best, has been proved to be unfruitful in most cases, though not in all. This type of missionary thinking can be seen in the opening scenes of the movie The African Queen. The current picture is of a couple, maybe a single man or a single woman, or two or more teams in a large city, planting churches and helping them to progress through the 4 stages of church maturity. Churches in a populated area have many more resources available to them than remote villages in a jungle or on a sparsely populated plain. The expectation is that these churches will soon be sending church planters and missionaries throughout their own country, to be quickly followed by missionaries to other countries. Panama and Colombia are examples of the success of this concept, although it was initially practiced in those countries by accident. How does this affect Meadows Fellowship? We currently have short-term mission teams going to the Philippines, a Stage 4 country, to Central America, specifically Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador, all of which are Stage 1-2 countries, and to Mexico, which is a Stage 3-4 country. The purposes of these trips are very different. In the Philippines, the teams focus on evangelism and construction through the national leader. In Central America, the teams focus on training pastors and church leaders and in coming alongside the churches to assist them in their outreaches. In Mexico, the teams joined the FMI missionaries and, through them, local pastors in their evangelism and some construction. The differences in thrust in these countries are a challenge for the Missions Council to ensure teams are effective in keeping Meadows members enthusiastic about teams that don't sound exciting, like teaching leaders, and being a positive impact on the countries we visit. In the 2 years the Missions Council at Meadows has existed, the changes in attitude, expectation, and focus have been dramatic, and Meadows has come far more in line with the ideas and the vision of Foursquare International.